Good evening and welcome to the Fairfield City Schools Board of Education, June 28th, 2022, regular session. The meeting will come to order. Mrs. Lane, please call the roll.
Mr. Begley? Ms. Birding? Here. Mr. Clark?
Present.
Mrs. Gundrum? Here. Mrs. Shorter?
Here. Mr. Scott, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Smith, let's start with presentations and resolutions.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Shorter and members of the board. We do have one presentation this evening. As you know, our school district has an outstanding relationship with the Fairfield Prevention Coalition. This evening, Joe Markowitz, the director at the coalition, will be presenting regarding some student survey data. And I think he probably brought some other folks with him as well to assist. But at this time, I will turn it over to Mr. Markowitz.
Mr. Smith, and good evening, everyone. I know everybody's really feeling joyful about looking at data, especially student data, but this will not be painful. So the Student Drug Use Survey, we use it with the Fairfield Prevention Coalition and with all four of our youth coalitions in the middle schools, the freshman school, and the high school. We use that data to drive our priorities. What should we be working on? What's trending up? What's trending down? How do we compare to schools in Butler County in general? And also, how do we compare to the region, of this region in Ohio? So there's a lot of good information in there. So I'd like to share some of this with you. This survey is done every 2 years in grades 7 through 12. It measures risk and protective factors. If you know anything about the public health model, you know that we can look at risk factors that will determine outcomes in young people, and also the protective factors that we can enhance that will buffer them from those risks. Things like trying drugs for the first time and alcohol and things like that. What this survey we want to share with you tonight, the biggest part of the survey we want to share is substance use. That's kind of the main focus of our coalition, along with mental health and some other things. But the student survey is accurate and reliable. It's been done for years by Prevention First, which is a outstanding certified prevention agency in the state of Ohio. This particular survey saw us survey 3,196 students in grades 7 through 12, as I've mentioned before. We use this data a number of ways. It helps us understand youth attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. A lot of times there are misperceptions about what young people think or what young people are up to, but this data actually lets us get right down to how they actually feel. It helps us to shape perceptions, practices, and policies, and we'll talk about a policy recommendation at the very end of this presentation. And it helps to draw resources to the community for prevention. And we don't do intervention, we do prevention. We're trying to do universal prevention where every youth is at risk, and we're trying to work with everyone. So a couple slides here real quick. This is our 5 big areas that we're focusing on. 30-day substance use. This is the percent of students in this survey from the fall of 21. And these are the current rates. 2% of our students admit to using tobacco products. 9.3% alcohol, 6.3% marijuana, 2.4% prescription pain medications, and 9.9% with vaping. And you know, with the vapor product use, we can clear up a couple misperceptions about it in this presentation as well. So the only thing about this particular data here, this is called a snapshot, so that we know what percent of youth have reported using those substances last fall. What it doesn't show you is a trend, so we're going to show you a trend as well. Now this is interesting. This is one of the most important things we found when we were diving into the data. When we looked at 30-day substance use by gender, looking at tobacco, alcohol, marijuana, prescription pain medications, and e-vapor, we actually saw a higher rate of use among female students than we did males. And that was kind of interesting. We didn't really know if that was going to happen again. This has actually been going on for a couple surveys now. So we would use information like this to guide our efforts, our outreach efforts, and our prevention activities for the upcoming school year. What's interesting about that slide is that when we looked at the perceived risk of substance use, and you want these numbers to be as close to 100 as you can, we want students to feel that, hey, if I use this particular substance, whatever it is, this could put me at risk. I may not know what I'm doing with this drug. I may not even know what this drug is. So we want these numbers to be higher. Well, what we found with the females is their perceived risk of using those substances was high, but they were still engaging in those behaviors, which we thought was interesting. So we on July 5th and 6th, we're actually getting our high school coalition together at the YMCA, and we're actually going to plan events and activities and campaigns this upcoming school year around some of this data. And that's where our youth involvement piece comes. So a couple more slides real quick here. This is past 30-day use. One of the reasons they call this past 30-day use of alcohol is these are your regular users of alcohol. If it was lifetime use of alcohol, you could have a student who tried a wine cooler, maybe had a sip of wine or beer at a family event, and never used the substance again. That would be lifetime use. But this is past 30-day use. These are your regular users by grade level, and the colored bars are the years 2013, 15, 17, 19, and 21. So what brings to our attention here is that in grades 7, 8, and 9, the percent of alcohol use rose from last year to this year with our younger students. For example, the ninth graders went from 7.1 use to 10.8% use. And quite the opposite with the older students. 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, some of them seeing dramatic reductions in alcohol use. And I have a theory about that, which I'll share with you in just a moment. But if you look at the 12th grade bar on the far right, in 2017, 31.6% of 12th grade students were using alcohol regularly. That is down to 10.2%. That is a dramatic drop. That's huge. I would love to correlate this with our coalition efforts. I mean, you'd have to be a scientist to figure that out, but I'm going to go to bat and say our coalition effort had something to do with that. Mm-hmm. This is past 30-day use for marijuana, same kind of graph. What we see here is a reduction in every single grade level in marijuana use. So if we can just put the newspaper aside for a minute and what we hear on the street, and if we go to 3,196 students and ask them, in an anonymous, accurate, and reliable survey, have you tried marijuana in the past 30 days? The majority of students have not. And that's one of the good takeaways in this data presentation is our young people continue to make good decisions. Again, if you look at the 12th grade cohort, the brown bar being 2019, that was a couple years ago, a little bit over 20% of students using marijuana regularly, down to 8.6%. And that's huge. And in a moment, I'll show you a slide comparing the Fairfield City Schools to Butler County. We fared very well in the county comparison. This is past 30-day use for prescription drugs not prescribed to you. This is one of our 5 focus areas. Prescription pain medications some of them have the same chemical compounds as heroin. So when you get off that prescription drug, you cannot actually get off of it, so you start looking for heroin. So this is an important statistic for us. What we found here was that we saw reductions in prescription pain release or use. 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade all went down, and 7th grade went up, and 11th grade went up. So again, this is going to drive our efforts when we do our prevention planning for the upcoming school year. We have to, as you'll find out in a minute, we're going to need to get down into the middle schools and do a little more work with awareness and education campaigns. Here's the vapor products, and so this would be past 30-day use of electronic vaping. It's not saying what's in the vape. That's a different question on the survey. This is just vaping in general. We saw increases in vaping use for 7th grade, 8th grade, and 9th grade, but we saw the opposite in 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. And if you look at the 12th graders, again, 25% of students were vaping 2 years ago, and that is down to 11.3%. This is very encouraging data. You usually don't see drops like this, but we also had a phenomenon called COVID-19, and that could have something to do with this. So jury's still out on that. Now let me explain this slide to you. This is perceived harmful effects. Now again, we want this to be as high to 100 as possible. We want all students to think that vaping is harmful. That's where we want to be. Well, that went up in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, so those students got the message. That perceived harmful effect of a vapor product was received by our upperclassmen. However, our 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, their perceived harmful effects actually went down. So this is an opportunity for our youth coalition and our prevention coalition to, again, go after this with education awareness and maybe our farming effects and other things that we can be doing in the middle schools. So we'll be using this data to drive that effort. And here's perceived harmful effects from marijuana. And it dropped in 7th grade, it dropped in 8th grade, and it dropped in 11th grade, and that's the wrong direction, okay? But we saw the 9th, 10th, and 12th graders perceiving marijuana to be harmful. Now, this is a very confusing subject to most young people. Why are we trying to legalize it? It can't be too bad, if they're trying to legalize it. There's a lot of stigma out there about the legalization of marijuana, and it's probably having an effect on our students. So we want to think about how we can address that. Here's the last one I'm going to show you with perceived harmful effects. This one is for prescription drugs not prescribed to you. This is actually not a good statistic. In all grade levels, the perceived harmful effects of using prescription drugs not prescribed to you actually went down in all grade levels. So again, an opportunity for our coalition to roll up our sleeves and do some good work in the schools. And by the way, those numbers are very close to the Butler County numbers as well. And perceived availability, I want to talk about this for 1 second. One of the risk factors for substance use, onset, misuse, and even accidental overdose is the availability of drugs and alcohol. So if the perceived availability of drugs and alcohol is higher in students, they're actually at higher risk to use those substances. So with this particular slide, the perceived availability of all these alcohol products went down, and this is a good thing. See, if students think, hey, I don't have access to alcohol, or I don't have access to marijuana, or I don't have access to prescription drugs that are not prescribed to me, if we can get them that perceived availability down, this is a step in the right direction. So this is actually an encouraging slide for us. This could also be, and I'll just go ahead and throw my comments in here, I believe this could have something to do with our COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of our students were hybrid or they were in quarantine. The availability of those substances could have been impacted by that in a positive way, believe it or not. Perceived availability of marijuana went down across every grade level. Again, same statistic as with the alcohol. Again, our students' perceived availability of getting substances actually went down, and that's a positive direction for that trend. A couple slides on mental health real quick. The question was asking students, do you feel nervous or anxious in the past 30 days? The 2 bars on the left are the answers of I feel this way all of the time, or I feel this way most of the time. The other ones are none of the time and a little of the time. So what we're seeing with this particular slide, if you look at the 9th graders, for example, you got over 50% of your student population feeling nervous or anxious in the last 30 days. And again, this is a quantitative survey, it's not a qualitative survey, so we really don't know the reasons why they're reporting this. But we wanted to bring this to your attention because we want to address this as a coalition. And anxious and nervousness amongst our students just doesn't make for a positive school climate. These numbers are almost identical to Butler County. This is something that's all schools across the country are facing. Feeling depressed, sad, or hopeless in the past 30 days, the same thing. All of the time is the first set of bars, and the second one is most of the time. So again, you got roughly 40% of your students in 9th grade feeling depressed, sad, or hopeless in the past 30 days. So again, it just gives us something that we might want to focus on. And the last one for mental health is this. The question of my emotions actually cause problems in my life at school. The bars on the right are this is somewhat true. And again, you have about 1/4 of your school population who took the survey saying, yes, my emotions are causing problems in my life at school. So, and it doesn't say what or how or why. It's just those are the quantitative numbers. Okay, I'll give you a couple slides on trend data. And just real quick, on the left-hand column, you have 30-day use of alcohol, the perceived harm, peer disapproval, adult disapproval, age of first use, binge drinking, and is it easy to get. These are the percentages from 2010 to 2022 for alcohol. I want to show something to you real quick. The first row across the top, in 2010, 14% of our students were engaged in alcohol use, and as of the last survey, it was down to 9.3%. So that's a reduction. It's also a reduction from the last survey of about 1%. And I just want to explain to you, perceived harm and peer disapproval and adult disapproval, all 3 of those questions, we need those numbers to go up, and we need those numbers to be high, and as close to 100 as we can. We want people to say alcohol is harmful. We want peers to say we shouldn't be doing alcohol, and we want the adults to have the same message. And you can see for yourself that In perceived harm, we dropped a couple clicks, 3%. We dropped, I'd say we went up 1% in peer disapproval, and we went down 1% in adult disapproval. So there's some areas here we need to work on. Again, age of first use continues to go down. It was 12.9 in 2020. It's now down to 12.5. Binge drinking stayed about the same. It just went up 0.1% at 4.6% of our students binge drinking. And is it easy to get? This goes back to that question of availability. In 2020, 38% of our students said, hey, it's easy to get alcohol. As of the last survey in the fall, it was down to 31%. That is an encouraging trend. We don't want students to think that they can get easy access to drugs and alcohol. And I won't go into too much detail on these, but here's a tobacco chart. Same thing, tobacco use is down. The perceived harm is down, and that's not necessarily good. Peer disapproval for tobacco use is down. That's not necessarily good. And adult disapproval is down as well. And 2 surveys ago, 33% of our students say it's easy to get tobacco products. This last survey was down to 29%. Again, the availability is down. 2 more charts with this trend data. Marijuana, 30-day use dropped from 10% last survey to 6.3% this survey. And just a comment on that. Our positive social norming campaign that our students lead in the schools and out in our community, we want to put the good news about young people out there for people to see. We want to change that misperception about young people and drug use and other things. So we want to get, and we will continue to have a positive messaging campaign in our schools. Anything else to note here? Easy to get. Is it easy to get marijuana? Last survey, 32% of our students said yes, and that is down to 28%. Again, that's an encouraging statistic. I believe this is the second to the last slide on this trend data. So prescription drug use is down by 0.2%. And looking at the age of first use of prescription drugs, this is a little bit of a concern, but it's a concern that all schools across the country are having. 12.1 years old for the onset of prescription drug misuse. That's 6th grade. So if we're going to do prevention, we need to do it there. We need to meet them where they're at, head them off, and turn them around in a very positive way. And again, is it easy to get? Well, the last survey, 27% of students said, yeah, it's easy for me to get prescription drugs that aren't prescribed to me. That went from 27% down to 24%. That's encouraging. That's encouraging. And then if we were to compare our school district data in those big 5 areas, alcohol, tobacco, marijuana use, prescription drug use, we can see that the Butler County numbers in blue, and we can see our Fairfield City School District in the pink. And so we, generally speaking, are doing better than the schools in Butler County. I said we as in the Fairfield City School District. We still have similar concerns with peer disapproval, parental disapproval, and perceived harm. Those numbers aren't as high as they need to be. So other schools in Butler County are having the same issues as we are across the state. And the last thing real quick, core measures for major drugs of initiation. These are the areas that we're going to be working on as a coalition, and this is going to guide our youth coalition efforts in prevention planning. If you look at the vapor product use, this is kind of a new question, but not really. So you got almost 10% of our students using vapor products regularly. Only 68% of our students think that vaping is harmful. That number is too low. We need to get that number up. 91% of our parents believe that vaping is harmful. We need to get that number up. We're going to be working on that. And friend disapproval, this is all about peers, is only 69% of peers believe, that students believe their peer would tell them that they shouldn't be doing vaping. Only 69%. We have to get that up. When does vaping begin for our students who took this survey? About 13 years old. So they're starting other substances earlier, but vaping kind of 13 years old. And 34% of our students who took the survey, those 3,196 students, said it's easy for me to get my hands on a vapor product. So that's interesting information. So at this time, we have a couple of our student coalition members who are just going to take a couple minutes to hit some highlights from each school, and I'll let them introduce themselves as well.
So good evening. My name is Devin Duncan, and I am the junior class officer for the Fairfield Prevention Coalition, and I'm representing Creekside and Crossroads this evening. And before I begin, just a thank you to you guys for listening to this presentation. We know that having involved, leaders in our school district, it makes better students, it makes better schools, better communities, and that's how we ultimately get these numbers down. So for Creekside, we noticed that alcohol use tripled between 7th and 8th grade. And so our focus as we go into our July meetings are going to be planning activities on that friend disapproval and that perception of harm. So really educating and drilling down how using these substances can affect you, your body, your health, mental, physical, social, and all of the above. So that's what we really noticed for Creekside. And again, that's, that triple, it's scary, but I believe that we could get it down. For Crossroads, we noticed that vaping was on the rise, and the perception of harm with vape is 69%, but with tobacco, it is 85%. So we need to do a better job of educating that vape leads to nicotine use, which would be that tobacco, and we know that they realize that 85%, meaning that they realize that that substance is harmful. How can we educate that, that's what vape is starting off to be, and that's where you're going to reach if you don't, be informed and ultimately stop. The second point is that our alcohol use is increasing from 6 to 9% between 7th and 8th grade, so Crossroads is doing better than Creekside, shall I say. And so again, focus on that perception of harm and friend disapproval, really drilling down how these substances affect people. Our third and final point for Crossroad and Creekside was the perception of harm in using marijuana and e-vape is the lowest on the chart. So while we need to focus in general about educating about how these things can affect our health, we really need to focus on marijuana and e-vape. So going forward as we lead into the school year and as we go throughout the school year, that will be our focus.
I'm Bella Gorchek. I've been a member of the coalitions for like 3 years now. I think this will be my 3rd year. And I'm going to be talking about the freshman school data. So 21.6% say that they are depressed often or a lot, and 36.5% say that they have anxiety often or a lot. And so we, as a coalition, we're going to try to make that go down. And next, vaping is the highest on 30-day use and lowest on perception of harm. So, and we need to get the number up for perception of harm because vaping isn't, it should not be thought of as not harmful. And lastly, why do 12% of parents not care about their child drinking alcohol? Well, a lot of parents, they think that alcohol isn't as harmful, like if they provide it to their child. They're like, we can watch you, we should talk about how we should re-educate like the parents as well as the children about that can still be harmful to them too. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Thompson. I'm a senior at the high school and also the president of the Fairfield Coalition. So I'm going to be talking about our high school data. For one of our points, we noticed that 58.5% of students report feeling consistent stress or anxiety. So we really want to increase knowledge on coping skills, stress-reducing options at school, because we all know that when you feel stressed or anxious, that leads to other substances to kind of cover up what's going on in your life. Another point that we noticed was there's an increasing number of females that are using substances, and that has consistently risen over the past 4 years. So we really want to maybe work with some women's leadership clubs at the high school to kind of promote a better climate at the school and create a more self-esteem for those females. And then our third point was, even though the use of marijuana has decreased in the school, the friend and parent disapproval rate are dropping. And whether that is due to the legalization of marijuana, we don't know, but we need to get to the root of that cause and re-educate our students on what is the best options, and also just like reiterate the coping skills and stress-reducing things we can promote for them. So, and we also know that those warning signs lead to increased use. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Alyssa, Devin, and Bella. Thank you for your input. We'll just wrap this up with a couple of key takeaways. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic decreased the availability of substances, which had an impact on the use of those substances. So if there was one positive thing that came out of that pandemic, that would be one of them, and it decreased the availability of the substances. But on the other hand, COVID-19, the pandemic, negatively impacted mental health. We're going to be looking at those numbers very closely, and we get a lot of feedback from our youth coalition and their friends and their peers, and they tell us all the time about how it has impacted them. Another key takeaway, Fairfield schools have lower rates of substance use when compared to Butler County schools in general, except in the area of prescription pain misuse prescriptions. And that percent is only off by, I think, 0.1%. It wasn't dramatic and it wasn't exceptional. And the last couple takeaways real quick. Although most substance use is trending down, parent and friend disapproval rates are dropping. That's going the wrong direction and can lead to future substance use. It's recommended that we also possibly look at if there isn't one that already exists, a policy for vaping. And not just a punitive policy, but one that gets a young person into that help and education awareness that they need to make better, healthy lifestyle decisions. The last point I'll make, the student data reviewed in this report will be used for student and coalition-level strategic planning. If you know anything about effective evidence-based prevention planning, we have to have data drive the process. We should always be asking ourselves, why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we doing these campaigns? Why are our high school students going down to middle schools and doing farming effects, talking about the dangers of prescription drug misuse? Because that's where the data is telling us to go. So with that, we thank you for your time. There's a lot of information. If you take time to look at the 6 volumes of reports, there's a lot of information in there. The coalition wants to work alongside you on some of these issues, but overall, the data looks really encouraging for a lot of our student substance use. So can we answer any questions at this time? We also have our historian, Pat Van Offlen, whom everybody knows. She's been on the coalition for 114 years now, so just kidding, just kidding. But is there anything we can answer for you?
I did have a question, if I can get back to my notes. Okay. One of the things that was mentioned by, I think it was Evan, in looking at Creekside and Crossroads with the middle schools, I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity where you could possibly partner with students that are interested in graphic design so that you could put together, of course, with your help from your liaisons at the Prevention Coalition, if you could put together tailored marketing materials that really correspond to your age group and maybe specific to that school, do you think that would help?
Well, I actually happen to be interested in graphic design a lot, so I do think it helps. I think giving that information in ways that, we see every day, and that's going to be graphic design, that's going to be through these little infographics, is, what I would call them. So definitely that, and putting that education in here. I actually was a part of the freshman training session just a few weeks ago, and we did a survey at the end of that, and one of the things that basically all of our students noted that did that survey was that they enjoyed the statistics. So exactly what Joe has just presented to you, I believe you guys have the same packet that we gave them. And so they enjoy looking at that data and seeing where, every school lies, where we need to work on, where we don't need to work on. So giving them that, so, perception of harm, they realized that was low, so giving them the facts. This is harmful, and giving it in just these easier to handle, easier to understand materials would absolutely help. And so that would be through graphic design, videos, things like that.
Excellent.
Thanks for asking a question. Anybody else before we let you get down to board business?
I had a question. First of all, thank you all so much for putting this data together and coming here tonight to talk to us about it. We really appreciate it. The questions about whether the student feels nervous or anxious or depressed, sad, or hopeless, I don't expect you to have the answer here tonight, but I'm kind of curious as to whether you all track it from year to year. Like, are this year's freshmen, next year will you be able to tell whether the percentages went up or down with they felt anxious all the time and whatnot?
Good question. So it's an anonymous survey, but we do it by cohort, which means all the ninth graders get a survey. Next year, they'll be the 10th graders. So we actually do follow those cohorts, but we don't know who they are, and that's the beauty of the survey. But yes, we do. And that's our trend data. That's some of the stuff I was sharing with you in the presentation. There's a lot more of that information available. But yes, you could dig down deeper and you could find specific grade levels where, sadness and depression is really high in some student grade levels.
Okay, that's kind of what I was wondering, because just looking at like ninth grade, it's like the entire class. Basically, I don't think there was none of the time answers for feeling nervous or anxious. And that's kind of scary. And I'm kind of wondering, is that normal for ninth grade because they're in a new environment and?
That's a significant point, and when we look at the data, such as Joe pointed out about 11th grade being particularly high in certain areas, where our 12th grade was down, well, our 11th grade in that survey are now our seniors. And so we have to focus ahead. Our freshmen that were showing that anxiety and depression are now sophomores. So when we target that area, we have to remember that we got to target the sophomore class and look at those issues. And some of the other things that we can do is maybe partner with the health classes, the health teachers, and do some focus groups, some different things in the areas of that to get down to the idea of why are females feeling pressured? Are they feeling pressured, et cetera, to do that. And looking at your question about Creekside and the demographics and the Instagrams and things, it's again, now those 8th graders are 9th graders. So when we had our 9th grade training this year, we gave them the 8th grade statistics because this is their class now. So yes, we do look at that and project towards it and then track it for the next year.
Okay, great.
And by the way, all of our activities, events, and campaigns are strengths-based. We are all about the positive in young people, and we stay away from scare tactics and other things like that.
Pat, is there any longer history, like from 10 years ago, that you're able to?
Yeah. In fact, the alcohol history there where it said, well, it started out with 20% use when we first started tracking was at 57%.
What about the stress
So
and the anxiety?
the stress and the anxiety is something that's newer. And probably won't go back until much earlier than 2010.
Okay, fair enough.
Because it's just become a recognized
Right.
issue. So we had just talked to Joe about for our meeting with the planning meeting for the senior coalition, that we need to find out some information ahead of time, like the mental health committee, who's in charge of that, what plans maybe the school has itself this year for focusing on mental health, and so that we can support that in our activities and actions that we do, so it becomes more of a collaboration and not a repetition from place to place. So, but it will be tracked now, you can be assured of that,
Yeah,
going
absolutely.
through.
Was you doing, I just want to thank Mr. Markowitz and Ms. Van Laufen for your dedication to the students, but they're the ones. So Melissa, Bella, Evan, thank you so much for everything you do, the leadership that you have, your involvement for year after year after year. I have a young man in Creekside, and he needs you. He's not going to listen to me as much as he would you. Oh, he'll listen to me, but he'll listen to you, and that's very, very important. And Joe, I love what you always say about bringing up the positives, because it's easy to say, well, these kids are doing this, and they're doing this, and this is up, and that's up. But the fact is, there's some great, great things going on. And the coalition itself, the youth coalition itself, continues to grow larger and larger in numbers every year. And it's because of what you guys do, laying that path for those younger students, having that pipeline in the Creekside and Crossroads and those 5th, 6th, 7th grade, or I'm sorry, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade kids to come up and be you to others. So thank you for what you do. And some of the activities, events that you guys do, and my favorite is that TV thing with the squares when you do the commercial.
Farming effects.
Farming effects, yes, thank you. That is hilarious. but it's effective, and that's what gets the young people's attention. So again, thank you for what you do. Thank you for your leadership. As a parent, I appreciate it. As a board member, I'm thankful for it. And as a community member, I appreciate it as well. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you. And thank you again for your time. We know you guys have a lot to do, so thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments?
I didn't have any questions for the presentation, but as the rest of the board, I am also very thankful for you guys as staff working in the community and helping the students, but definitely for sure the students stepping up as leaders to lead the pathway for the younger kids who may listen more to people they look up to. So thank you.
Yes, and thank you so much. You guys are so articulate, well-spoken, put together. Great job. I can just see the benefits that this program brings. And there are some places, yes, where we've had some minor slips, but I am confident that those are going to improve. We're moving past COVID, so that's going to present a challenge. But I love the work that you're doing. Please keep it up. Thank you so much.
And I agree with everything you said.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right. Okay, now it's time for communication, even though that was great communication there. This is the portion of the meeting where you, the residents of Fairfield City Schools, are invited to share your thoughts with the board. In order for the board to fulfill its obligation to complete the planned agenda in an effective and efficient fashion, a maximum of 30 minutes of public participation may be permitted at each meeting. Please know that this time has been set aside for the board to listen to you. Your comments are valued and will be taken into careful consideration. The board will not engage in dialogue at this time. Presentations are limited to 5 minutes each. Do we have anyone that signed up?
No.
Okay, we don't, so